Cuphead is such an amazing game with just beautiful bosses. But of course, all those bosses are so different from each other. Some bosses will be easy, some bosses will be hard, and some bosses will just be downright ridiculous. So shall we rank every single boss in Cuphead's entirety from easiest to hardest? So the first boss we will rank is the fight against Mangosteen. Mangosteen's fight is really easy. Just dodge the orbs and dash under the billiard chalks. And yeah, that's literally all there is to this fight. It is just so easy. Moving on. And moving on, we have yet another King Dice mini-boss. These are probably the easiest in the game, and that probably is what the developers intended, considering they are mini-bosses. The Tipsy Troop is just so simple. Although there can be a tiny bit of chaos when all three glasses still standing, after one's knocked out, the other two are cake. And the next boss up is Mr. Wheezy's. Another King Dice mini-boss and a really easy one. The fireballs have a really consistent pattern, which is easy to dodge, and even if the cigarette bats do block you, you can just stand on the edge and be safe. So yeah, not much else to say about this one. Next up is actually Cagney, which you may be surprised to hear, but I really find Cagney to be an absolute joke. His seeds are very easy to dodge, and by just shooting the roundabout and parrying the pink one, all the plants inside will die so easily. Even in his final phase, the vines telegraph exactly on the platform they're about to rise up on, and the pollen, is that somewhat of a joke? Like, seriously? Another King Dice mini-boss up here. This one is a Chips Bedigan, and this one is also, like, really easy. See, just jump and then dash at the right time to make your way through the chips, and that's all that is to this boss. Now, the King Dice mini-bosses are all really easy, which is why they're at the bottom of the list. Anyway, next up is Fear Lap, and you just shrink into your plane mode and dash through the blue horse riders and just evade the horseshoes, and that's really all there is to this fight. Now coming in is the first fight in the game, well, one of the first. You can choose your actual first fight. It is against the Root Pack. Now this is actually like just really easy. The potato, just jump. Onion, just move out the way of the tears. And carrot, just shoot down the homing carrots. And that's literally all there is to this fight. I mean, it's the first fight of the game, so it's obviously going to be simple, but yeah. Next! And that next is the second fight you can choose from to start the game with. Now this one is definitely harder than the Root Pack, but still ridiculously easy. It's the fight against Goopy Legrand. And he just bounces around and occasionally stops to throw a punch. Second phase he does this, but bigger. And third phase he just slides past you and occasionally slams himself down on you. That's really it for this fight. Right, now that the like really easy bosses are out the way, you know what's coming. Not the King Dice mini-boss, this time the fight against Pip and Dot. Really, just jump over the spikes, and the 12-sided die that they shoot at you, actually I think it's maybe 20-sided, I don't know. It can be annoying when combined with the spikes, but really it's never a problem. So yeah, moving on. And now we're actually moving on to DLC Isle this time for the fight against the pawns in the King's Gauntlet. Now, you just parry the ones that do have heads and jump over the ones that don't, and that's all there really is to this fight. And now one of those Isle 3 bosses. This Isle is weird, where bosses can either be really hard or really easy, and Werner is definitely on the really easy side of things. Werner Werman first phase is extremely simple. The only real phase that can provide an annoying slip-up is phase 2, because of all the bottle caps and Werner blocking off half the screen when he shoots his fire. But yeah, it's really still really simple. Now, yet another King Knife mini-boss, but this one is actually different. Now, the mini-bosses are really hard to die to, but these last two can definitely chip some damage off you. We start out with, of those last two, we'll start out with Hocus Pocus. And yeah, this fight can be quite a challenge, especially if you get unlucky with the skulls, and parrying the hearts of the card suits when they are above you can definitely be a challenge too. And the final one of the King Dice mini boss fights, this one is actually pretty darn hard. The fight against Mr. Chimes. You must play a game of memory match before eventually being able to fight Mr. Chimes, as he will slam together cymbals and unleash music notes. This fight is definitely a pretty hard one, and I tried my best to just straight up avoid it on the board and just skip past it. Honestly, it is ridiculous. Now moving on to the fastest playing fights, we start out with definitely the easiest one of all of them, Hilda. It is really easy, even when she transforms into the star constellations. It's still pretty darn easy, no matter if she's a blimp or the star constellations. And yeah, I've really not got much more to say about this fight. And the final fight of Inkwell Isle 1, and pretty hard for the first isle in the game. Like, I'd understand if this was like on the second isle, but it's actually pretty darn hard for the first isle in the game. Now, the first and second phase really isn't much, but that dumb slot machine phase can definitely result in a trip up, especially if you get unlucky with what platforms it gives you. The yellow ones I typically find to be by far the hardest because of the hopping ball in the middle of them. And yeah, that's really it for this fight, but it is pretty darn hard. Now moving on to the second one of the King's Gauntlet, the Knight is up next. Now, the Knight is a bit different. You have to wait for him to do an attack and then parry his head, since he will let his guard down after doing so. These fights are rather simple, but can pose some sort of a challenge. And also, if you're too far from the Knight won't do an attack, thus won't let his guard down until you come closer. But yeah, there's not really much to these King's Leap fights. Yahara mateys, let's come on to the 7 seas as we fight our Captain Briny Beard over here. Now, Briny Beard is really not that hard. Some of his attacks can catch you off guard, especially the barrel, but nothing can really trip you up too much in this fight, making it a pretty darn easy one. And then yet another Isle 3 boss. I feel like most of the bosses on this isle are like pretty darn easy, except for like 2 or 3 that are really annoying and can trip you up. But sadly, stage play is definitely not one of those fights. It is super darn easy and really simple. So yeah, it's just a standard Cuphead fight that is just a decently easy one. Not really much else to say about this fight. And so now we have 2 more King's Leap fights. We'll get to the final one of them later. The first one we'll tackle is the Bishop. You must put out candles and dodge bells and the Bishop's head. And after putting out all the candles, the Bishop's head will turn pink and you can parry it. You must then repeat this process enough times before the Bishop will eventually be knocked out. And now this is meant to be the final boss of the King's Leap. But the Queen doesn't really fit that title. I think the second final boss would actually be much more fitting for that, because the Queen is actually rather easy. You just have to aim cannons properly, dodge gemstones, and then parry some passing lion statues as they pass by you. And yeah, although there's quite a few attacks and the cannons are pretty annoying and hard to hit, it's really not that bad. Now for the final boss of the game, the Devil. Now, the Devil has quite a few attacks that can definitely catch you off guard if you aren't paying attention. But however, not many of the attacks are actually that threatening. Some of them are pretty annoying and hard to dodge. The other ones really aren't very bad at all. And yeah. And in the second phase, like, those platforms can be kind of tricky to traverse, but the Devil having such a huge hitbox just makes this phase actually pretty darn easy, since you can just spam the spread shot EX in his eyes. And yeah, that's really all there is to this fight. Next up is the fight against the Moonshine Mob. Now, this fight can be a bit of a trip up, but really isn't that bad. And as long as you can get rid of all the bugs in the first phase. Dodge roll with Chalice when the music waves become red in the second phase. And get rid of all the bug balls in the third phase that the Anteater will pull in with his tongue. You really shouldn't have too much of an issue with this fight. And now is the Phantom Express. Now, this boss is one of those bosses that like has a pretty difficult final phase. But the final phase doesn't actually really have much health, because in the final phase it can be pretty hard to parry the tail and dodge all that fire, along with those little bone ring things that it shoots out. I have no idea why it shoots them out, but it just does. And yeah, that's really all there is to Phantom Express. Coming back to the DLC, we have Blunstone the Giant. Now, this fight has a pretty easy first and third phase. However, it is absolutely brutal second phase. Just, the ball isn't that bad, but the gnomes, oh my goodness, the little gnomes that pop out of the ground. And then when you go to dodge them, you get hit in the face by the ball. It's just ridiculous. And that is why I find this fight so hard. But the first and third phases are absolutely trivial. Now you might be very, very, very confused for why I've saved Beppy until now. And that is mainly because the first phases are rough and can chip damage off, and then the final phase is just downright ridiculous. Like, honestly, having to traverse these platforms while making sure you jump on them to evade the roller coaster when it passes by, and also dodging baseballs from these little stupid green penguins that Beppy spits out of his mouth, and also have a high chance of damaging you if you accidentally fall down. It's just ridiculous. Next is the Howling Aces. Now, this fight, although difficult, is also really, really fun. Now, the tennis balls are hard-ish to dodge, and the bone tattoos can be annoying, but it's really not too bad. The Yankee Yippers are like really, really... It's mainly annoying when the screen freaking flips, bro! Like, seriously, is that just a bit overkill or something. Like, bro! Right, time for a little treat when it comes to Baroness von Bonbon's Sugarland. Yummy! So, yeah. This fight's 3 original minions isn't very hard, but the final phase can trip you up a bit, mainly because of when Baroness von Bonbon chucks her head at you. The mint can be annoying, but really never a huge issue. It's mainly the Baroness's head, which is what makes this fight so challenging. But it's still not bad. So, you know how there's like five King's Leap bosses? And I've only covered 4. That is because of how hard this final fight against the Rook actually is. You have to parry heads back at the Rook. And the amount of heads you have to parry can be kind of ridiculous, honestly. Like, you have to parry 10 heads back at the Rook. And the annoying thing is, you have to keep up with the head and then parry it again. Like, I'd understand if you had to parry it twice, but no. You have to parry it multiple times, and that wouldn't be fine. Well, you usually only have to parry it twice, but sometimes 3 times, because he usually will yeet them towards the back of the screen, which would be fine on its own, except that there's sparks and normal skulls that are unparryable. Like, seriously, bro, isn't that just a little bit overkill? Like, bro, come on. Now, a plane level hasn't really popped up for a while, hasn't it? And that's because most of these fights are actually pretty darn hard. However, Wally Warbles is not really that bad. Although he can have a slip-up, he's really not quite that bad. Unless you decide to fight him in Expert, of course. So, this is ridiculous. These eggs, how they split in Expert is just insane, man. But in normal, he's really not a very bad boss. In Expert, though, he's one of the hardest. So now we have Rumor Honeybottoms. Now, Rumor Honeybottoms can be a pretty hard fight, but the attacks eventually get pretty consistent. But if you're not really used to fighting her, like you've been fighting another boss for a long time and you haven't really got in many runs on Rumor Honeybottoms, her attacks will definitely catch you off guard because some of them are quite annoying. However, the fact that you can shave off like half the health of her final phase before she even starts it is what makes this fight a bit easier. And by a bit I mean like a lot, because that final phase is just so rough. Now, although we've already covered all the mini-bosses on their own, the King Dice fight as a whole is a pretty tough one to beat, considering you have to fight at least 3 of those mini-bosses, and it can be tricky to actually get the ones you want, and not to mention the little fight at the end with King Dice, which can be a bit challenging. I don't find it very hard though, so yeah, I think we'll just move on. Now, one that may surprise a couple people, but I actually really find this boss to be quite hard, Jimmy the Great. Now, it's not really any of the phases apart from this little pillar part, and this dreaded Cuphead phase is also like really annoying because it always either will kill me or make me so low on health that I just immediately die in the final phase. The really annoying thing is Jimmy's hat that just follows you around and then shoots out all the bullets. It's just so annoying. Now we are getting pretty close to the end of this list. Now our next boss is actually going to be Grim. Now Grim I don't find to be like the hardest boss in the game or anything. I find him to be quite a hard one, but nothing close to the hardest boss in the game. He's not a plane fight after all. And yeah, he's not really that bad in his first or second phase. However, you can take a lot of damage and definitely die on that final phase, mainly because of accidentally bursting open the fireballs that he shoots out of his mouth. But it's not too bad, and as long as you can avoid doing them. You kind of have to stop shooting for a bit and then start shooting after they pass by you. But yeah, not the worst fight in the game. Now, for the two runner-ups of the final fights in the game, beginning with Dr. Carl's robot. I typically don't find this fight to be too hard, although I find it to be annoying, especially in that stupid third phase. Like, man, why does this have to be a thing? Like, obviously just dodging the chunks of the diamonds hard enough, but the game obviously didn't think so, since they had to add the electric walls that force you to either move up or down. And the only good thing about this is some of the parts are parryable, so you can use a good amount of supers, and also you can get A ranks fairly easily, so you don't have to replay this fight over and over if you're trying to get them. But yeah, it's still pretty hard, which is why it's one of the runner-ups for the top 3. Now, for the other one of the runner-ups, you may be surprised to see Mortimer here, but I really do not like this fight. But that dreaded third phase, like the other platforming fights, I don't find too hard, but this one having multiple attacks, making the platforms not really even the main focus, and also the fact that they all spin and have gaps in between them is really annoying. But even that second phase with the giant snow monster can still chip off some HP and maybe cause you to reset the fight a couple times, which is why I put him in 4th place. Now, the bronze medal goes to Saltbaker. Now, you were probably expecting to see him win like the silver or gold medal, but no, just the bronze one. And the sole reason, he's not a plain boss! So I hate the final 2 bosses, mainly because of the plane theme, because the planes are so open, and you can fly all around the screen. This one you just kind of jump. The screen can get pretty cluttered at times, but you are kind of just jumping around, and you don't have to worry about like completely moving out of the way of things. You just move side to side and like dash out the way. Okay. However, although it has really little health, something about that final platforming segment just is so hard for me, and I honestly have no idea why, although it's still not hard enough to go into the top 2. So, for the silver medal, I'm actually giving it to Cala Maria. Now, you may think that Dr. Carl would definitely deserve this over Cala Maria. Yeah, but I actually do not think that Dr. Carl is too bad when in comparison to Cala Maria. It's mainly really annoying when she combines the attacks together. Since you have to dodge, since dodging one thing as well as another, the thing that either will just add more chaos or or make it harder to dodge the first thing. It's just so annoying. Also, when she turns into Medusa and turns you to stone, and you have to mash your keys to get out, it's really quite annoying as well, and especially those eels. If you don't kill them fast enough, they absolutely fill up the screen. So now it's time for the gold medal. Saltbaker only got the bronze, but one of the bosses you have to fight to get the ingredients is so hard that I think it's harder than Saltbaker himself. Say hello to Esther Winchester. This fight is just straight up chaos, and there's no other way to put it. Although the first phase can be calm-ish, all the stuff getting sucked up during the second one, and those sausages in the third and fourth phase are just so chaotic. I don't understand and why this isn't the final boss of the DLC. It's just insane, which is why it is winning the gold medal for most difficult fights in Cuphead. Well guys, that is going to do it for this one. Make sure to smash the like button if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one. Good bye.